This woman broke reality and left a map behind. Introduction. Her name was Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. To most it sounds like something out of a forgotten century. Dusty, historical, harmless. But I want you to erase that thought right now, because if you knew what she truly discovered, you'd understand why her name still sends chills down the walls of secret societies, and why her teachings were never meant to reach people like you. Not because you're unworthy, but because once you understand what she found, you'll never see this world the same way again. And that is dangerous. You see, Blavatsky didn't write books to be admired. She didn't speak to be followed. She wasn't trying to convince anyone. She was building something else entirely. A coded map. Not a map made of places. A map made of thresholds. She left behind a system for slipping between realities, for breaking out of the illusion you've called life your entire existence, and entering the places they told you were unreachable, imaginary, or insane. And she did it without dying. No near-death experience, no fantasy, no fiction. She crossed over, consciously, and came back with information no one was supposed to possess. Now I need you to listen closely, because this isn't a story. It's not a theory. It's a warning. And more importantly, it's a key. If you stay with me until the end of this audiobook, something will change in you, maybe not loud, maybe not all at once, but something inside you, something that has waited lifetimes, will wake up. And when it does, you'll feel it. The tension in the air, the edges of your world bending, the sense that this place was never all there was. So here's your chance. You can turn this off, pretend this is entertainment, go back to scrolling and forgetting. Or you can walk forward, into the silence, into the unknown, into the crack she opened, where the walls between worlds begin to thin. This woman broke reality. And if you listen, you might just find the place where it broke, and the way through. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Invisible Fracture. This is where the illusion begins to crack. You've been told that reality is solid, that it's stable, measurable, and explainable. That's what you see is what it is. But what if that's not true? What if this entire life, your thoughts, your name, your history, what if all of it was just the surface? A paper-thin veil stretched over something infinitely more vast and infinitely more real. Helena Blavatsky didn't wonder. She didn't speculate. She knew. And not because someone told her, but because she broke the veil herself. She found the crack. She stepped through it. And what she saw didn't fit any of our stories. She called it the invisible fracture, not because it was hidden, but because it was ignored. Because most people aren't trained to look for it. They're trained to look away. Think about it. You've felt it before. The sensation that the world isn't quite what it seems. That time bends when no one's looking. That space isn't as fixed as we think. That your dreams are more than dreams. That déjà vu is more than a glitch. That maybe you've been here before. And maybe, just maybe, this world. I'm not the only one. Blavatsky knew that feeling wasn't random. It was a memory, a leak in the illusion. And if you followed it far enough, you'd find the first truth no one wants to admit. This world is not the most real one. It's just the one you've been taught to believe in the longest. She taught that existence is made of 7 planes, not 1. 7 layers. Each is more subtle, more intelligent, more alive than the one beneath it. And where do we live? The lowest one, the most dense, the most frozen. Not because we're cursed, but because we're asleep. Because we've been conditioned since birth to forget. Forget that we've crossed these planes before. Forget that we chose to come here. Forget that somewhere inside of us, a part still remembers how to get out. And here's where it begins. The first key, the one she left behind, it isn't a chant. It's not a ritual. It's not even a belief. It's emptiness. The first portal, she wrote, is not made of light. It is made of silence. But not the kind of silence you think. Not peace, not calm. Something more terrifying. She called it the Great Emptying. You see, your thoughts, They are anchors. Every thought you have ties you to this plane. Every memory, every judgment, every emotion, they form hooks into the physical world. You think you're meditating when you close your eyes. You're not. You're narrating silence. You're performing stillness. Blavatsky taught that real stillness, true stillness, is death while breathing. It's not calming the mind, it's disappearing the self. And most people never get that far, because the ego fights to stay. It clings, it screams, it distracts. It tells you to check your phone, to go back to sleep, to stop listening. But if you resist long enough, you begin to feel it. The edges of your identity start to fade. You forgot your name. You forget your body. And then you begin to fall inward. And it's there, in that descent, that the invisible fracture appears. It doesn't look like a door. It doesn't look like a tunnel. It's not something your eyes can see. It's a pressure shift, a frequency snap. Like reality just took a breath inward, and you're suddenly inside it. Your senses start failing. Time moves in spirals. Colors pulse behind your eyelids. And a sound, a buzzing, a vibration, starts to echo through your skull, like your body is remembering something ancient and wants to get out. That's the threshold, the first veil, the crack in the wall of the world. Blavatsky found it, and she didn't just visit it, she mapped it. But she warned, you cannot walk through that fracture carrying your mind with you. You must leave it behind like old skin. This is not an upgrade. It's a surrender. It's not about becoming more. It's about becoming less, until there is nothing left to hold you here. Only then does the fracture become a passage, and the moment you cross it, you understand why no one ever talks about this. Why do they laugh it off? Why do they hide it in books labeled fiction or mysticism? Because if this is real, then the rest of the world is not. And that's the most dangerous truth of all. In the next chapter, you'll learn how Blavatsky awakened a hidden sense inside the human body, a sense that doesn't see, but pierces, a vision beyond vision, a way of perceiving that bends space around the observer, and when it activates, the illusion doesn't just crack, it collapses, and what steps through it, it is not always what you expect. Stay with me, we're not done, we're just reaching the edge of the map. Chapter 2. Awakening the Higher Sense. You won't see it with your eyes, but it sees you. You've been taught that you have 5 senses: vision, hearing, touch, taste, smell. These are the tools you use to navigate the world. But that's not true. They're not tools. They're filters. They don't reveal the world, they limit it. They shrink it down to what your brain can tolerate. And Helena Blavatsky. She found the missing one. She called it the center of superior perception. It's not behind your eyes, it's not in your ears. It lives somewhere between your heart and your brow. And it's not a sense you use. It's a sense that uses you. When it awakens, you don't see the truth. You become aware that you were blind all along. Blavatsky said this center was dormant in nearly everyone, buried under distraction, logic, and identity. And to awaken it, you don't stimulate it. You starve everything that blocks it. She began with mental isolation, not retreat, not meditation retreats in the mountains with hashtags. I'm talking about something brutal. Silence of identity. No names, no roles, no mirrors, no voices, no language. She removed everything that reflected self until only the observer remained. Then came the symbols. She didn't decorate her world with them. She activated them. Symbols of the spiral, the eye, the flame, not as drawings, but as energetic devices, codes embedded with frequency. To her, a symbol wasn't art. It was a living instrument that changed your internal resonance just by contemplating it. You don't understand these symbols. You let them rewrite you, and then the sound. Words not meant to be translated. Sanskrit phrases are not designed to be spoken, but felt. She said these weren't mantras. They were key to vibration. When you pronounce them with perfect rhythm, something inside you responds. A place you didn't even know existed starts to vibrate. Your body becomes a tuning fork. Your breath, a portal. Your mind, a doorway made of sound, and then it happens. Something shifts. It begins quietly, a subtle pressure behind the brow, a soft trembling through the chest, then a buzzing, not in the ears, but in the soul. The world begins to blur, not like you're losing vision, but like you're seeing too much at once. Objects shimmer, edges soften, time hiccups. You blink and feel like the room just moved without you. Not metaphorically, literally. Space bends, walls breathe, silhouettes pulse where there's nothing. And you realize it's not the world changing. It's your receiver that just unlocked a hidden frequency. You didn't pierce the veil, you matched it. This is the higher sense, a perception that doesn't rely on the eyes, but still sees. It doesn't use ears, but her thoughts are unspoken. It doesn't require logic, because it understands through resonance. Blavatsky warned, when this center awakens, the physical world begins to tremble, not because it is weak, but because it has been exposed. You don't just gain sight, you lose protection, because now the illusion knows you see it, and it see you back. This sense isn't for comfort, it's for crossing. It's the organ that detects doors between dimensions, not by finding them, but by remembering where you left them lifetimes ago. And once it activates, you'll begin to feel something terrifying and beautiful all at once. This world is no longer stable. You'll see time folding around people. You'll feel other versions of yourself walking beside you. You'll start to sense intelligence in empty rooms. And sometimes, you'll look into someone's eyes and see something looking back that isn't entirely them. That's when you know you're not imagining, you're perceiving. In the next chapter, Blavatsky will do what almost no mystic dared to do. She will break her own reflection. She'll dismantle identity so violently, so completely, that even her own face began to feel like a costume. She called it the breaking of the mirror, because until you destroy the illusion of self, you'll never be free from the illusion of reality. Keep listening. The map is unfolding, and you're getting closer to the place where the veil doesn't just tremble, it tears. Chapter 3. Breaking the Inner Mirror. Before you can leave this world, you have to question the one who's living in it. Every person walks through life carrying a mirror, not the kind made of glass, but the kind made of beliefs. A mirror forged in childhood, polished by education, scratched by trauma, and glued together with stories like, "This is who I am. This is what the world is. This is what's possible." And every day, you look into that mirror, and you don't just see reality, you see your version of it, filtered through fear, memory, expectation, and conditioning. Now here's the terrifying truth. That mirror is a lie. Helena Blavatsky called it the reflective illusion. She said the mind doesn't show you what's real. It shows you what you've been programmed to accept, and so long as that mirror remains intact, you will never, and she meant never, see what lies beyond it. Not other dimensions, not higher planes, not your true self. Because the first illusion isn't the world, it's you. So she did something most feared to even imagine. She smashed it. "You must doubt everything," she wrote, "until nothing remains but the one who watches the doubt." That was her method. Radical doubt, spiritual demolition, not a belief, not worship, but total merciless self-inquiry. She questioned her name, her body, her history, her memories. Every identity she carried, she shattered. Was this pain mine? Was this love real? Was this fear taught to me? Or did I inherit it from 1,000 lives I no longer remember? She tore through each answer until there were no more answers. Only silence. And in that silence, the mirror cracked. This isn't meditation, this is war. Not against the world, man, but against everything inside you that pretends to be you. And let me be clear, this is not for the faint of heart. Because when the mirror begins to break, the world doesn't just look different. You no longer recognize yourself in it. You forget your preferences. You question your motives. You start to see yourself as a stranger in your own skin. It's disorienting, it's dizzying, and it's exactly where the door appears. Blavatsky called it the grieta, the fracture. It doesn't open while you're holding onto identity. It opens when you let go of the one who's trying to see it. Because until the mirror is broken, all you'll see is yourself, reflected back from a reality you unconsciously created. This is why the teachings are hidden. Not because they're evil, not because they're forbidden, but because most people are still in love with their reflection. They want to transcend, but only if they get to take their name with them. They want to awaken, but only if they can stay comfortable. But awakening isn't comfort, it's a collapse. And when the mirror collapses, something ancient begins to stir. Blavatsky wrote, in a forgotten page never published, a note found buried among her personal journals. The first time I crossed, I didn't recognize myself. I was me, and not me. My form was light, but also shadow. What I saw cannot be described, but what I felt was this: I am finally awake. That line was never meant for publication. It was a personal record, the kind you write when you've seen something so true, so unfiltered. You don't need anyone else to believe it, because you've become it. Here's what she realized: your identity is not your truth. It's a garment stitched together by society. And like all clothes, it wears thin. Eventually it falls off. So the question becomes, who are you when there's nothing left to reflect? That's the moment the mirror is gone. And that's when the real journey begins. Not forward, not upward, inward. Because beyond that collapse there's something watching, something old, something silent, something that reminds you of who you were before the forgetting. In the next chapter, you'll meet the gatekeepers who guard that passage. Not metaphorical, not imaginary. Blavatsky called them the guardians of the threshold. They're not here to punish. They're not here to guide. They're here to test if what remains of you it is strong enough to pass. And what they show you will break the final illusions. Get ready. Because after the mirror shatters, you're not just looking at the truth. The truth is looking back. Chapter 4. The Guardians of the Threshold. Some doors don't open with force. Some open when you disappear. There's a moment after the mirror breaks when you feel the world hesitate. Like the simulation loses confidence. Like the program can't decide what happens next. And for a split second, you can feel the breath of something ancient rising through the floor of your mind. This is the edge, the place between who you were and what you're about to become. But here's the truth. Blavatsky never sugar-coated. You don't get to cross freely. You have to be let through. And those who decide, they aren't what you think. She called them the guardians of the threshold, not angels, not demons, not light or dark, but forces, intelligences, ancient gatekeepers that exist between dimensions, at the seam of consciousness and chaos. Their job isn't to guide, their job is to measure, not your worth, not your fault, but your frequency, because energy doesn't lie. And when you stand before them, they don't listen to what you say. They read what you are. Some call them terrifying. Some say they appear in forms too complex for the mind to decode. Others say they don't appear at all. They become the room, the atmosphere, the weight in your chest. But one thing is always true. If you carry fear, they will devour it. If you carry pride, they will tear it apart. If you carry nothing, they will step aside. Blavatsky warned that arrogance was suicide. Ego is noise, and they are tuned to silence. If you enter vibrating with the need to conquer, prove, or impress, they'll fold your energy in on itself until it collapses like a dying star. But if you enter empty, not weak but still, not passive but surrendered, they will let you pass. Not because they like you, but because you've become compatible with what lies beyond. They're not your enemy, they're your filter. You can't bring noise into higher realms. You can't bring identity, attachment, or wounds that you haven't made peace with. Because in the worlds beyond the veil, What you are becomes what you see. There is no protection behind pretense. Your thoughts manifest instantly. Your shadows become entities. Your emotions create terrain. If you haven't faced your own chaos, it will meet you in form, and it will not be kind. Blavatsky knew this firsthand. In one of her unpublished writings, she described an encounter in the threshold. It had no shape, and yet I felt it circling me, not to harm me, but to expose me. It mirrored every thought I tried to hide, and when I stood still, when I became only breath, it vanished. She didn't win. She didn't fight. She aligned. That was her code. Resonance is the passport. No pleading, no ritual, no permission slip from a guru. Only inner stillness opens the gate. And here's the part most people miss. Some never come back. Not because they die, but because they fragment. They return to this world. But something is missing. A thread cut. A part of them is still trapped between what they couldn't face and what they tried to rush. This is not horror. This is a structure. You can't fake vibration. Blavatsky said the threshold is not to be feared. It is to be respected. Because when you reach it, you're not being punished. You're being asked a question. Can what's left of you survive what's next? Because what's next, it's not about breaking through anymore. It's about remembering what you left behind before you were born. The guardians don't block you out. They reflect the part of you that still believes this world is all there is. When that belief dies, so does the lock. In the next chapter, Blavatsky will reveal a power even deeper than the gate. Memory. Not of this life, but of every life. Not of time, but of existence across dimensions. She learned how to use memory as a bridge, to travel without motion, to awaken without ritual. Because if you can remember it, you can return to it. And that changes everything. Keep going. You're past the veil now. And it's not closing behind you. Chapter 5. Memory across lifetimes and planes. What you call memory might be the key you've been looking for. When people talk about awakening, they speak of light, of love, of rising above. But Blavatsky knew better, because her awakening didn't begin with peace. It began with a memory that didn't belong to this life, a landscape she'd never seen, but one her soul knew like an old dream, a memory so vivid, so piercing, so alive. It burned through her present like fire through dry grass. That's when she realized memory is not just remembrance, it is a return. We've been taught to treat memory like a file cabinet, neat, passive, fixed in the past. But in Blavatsky's system, memory was dimensional currency, a bridge between versions of reality and lifetimes forgotten by design. She called them soul echoes, not just psychological impressions, but coordinates in consciousness. And if you knew how to walk them, you could return to the places your body had never been but your essence had already touched. Imagine this, a single thought, a feeling you can't explain, a sound that stirs something ancient in you, and suddenly you're standing at the edge of a world you've never seen, but somehow remember. That isn't fantasy, that's access. Blavatsky taught that if you can feel a memory as deeply as you feel pain, as vividly as you feel love, then it becomes a location, a portal, not back in time, but sideways, across dimensions. She trained herself to navigate these memory bridges with precision, not through rituals, not through drugs, through pure recall. She would sit for hours, conjuring the feeling of a place, not its shape, but its essence, the texture of its air, the sound of its silence, the emotional gravity of its light, and when that feeling became louder than the present, she would slip through it. Her body remained still, but her being traveled. You've done this before. You just didn't know what to call it. That feeling of dreaming something more real than your waking life. That ache for a place you can't find on any map. That grief for someone you've never met. But feel like you've known across eternity. We've been told to ignore those feelings, to call them irrational, poetic, romantic. But what if they're breadcrumbs? What if your soul has left messages in your own subconscious, waiting for you to listen? Blavatsky believed those feelings were not distractions, they were maps, and she took it further. She discovered that certain memories weren't personal, they were transpersonal. They didn't belong to a single life, but to the larger consciousness she was part of. The soul is not linear, she wrote. It does not live in stories. It lives in threads, and every thread is tied to another version of you in another world you've forgotten how to reach. She trained herself to follow those threads, to enter them at will, and from there a new power emerged. She could remember events that had never happened, yet still affected her. She could trace emotions that weren't hers, but lived in parallel versions of her consciousness. These were not fantasies. They were interdimensional bleed-throughs, echoes, signals, reminders. And here's the part that might change the way you see everything. A true memory, one remembered from the soul. It is more powerful than any ritual, more accurate than any map, and more dangerous than any belief. Because once you remember what you were, you will no longer accept what you've become. This is why memory is suppressed, not by accident, but by design. The systems we live in, education, religion, science, they are all calibrated to flatten the soul, to bind memory to flesh, to reduce the infinite to a single life, a single job, a single identity. Because if you remembered that you've crossed before, that you've died before, that you've escaped before, you'd start looking for the exit again. And that is the greatest threat to this illusion. In the next chapter, Blavatsky takes us deeper still. She doesn't just remember her other selves, she meets them, she fuses with them. And in doing so, she discovers the most powerful spiritual operation of all, becoming one with your dimensional double, not a theory, not a metaphor. A ritual of fusion with the version of you living a parallel life in another world, right now. And when that happens, you don't just remember, you merge, and everything changes. Keep listening. The next step is the most irreversible of all. Chapter 6. The Dimensional Double. What if the version of you that made the other choice, that is still alive and watching? Helena Blavatsky didn't believe in parallel selves. She knew them. She didn't write about the concept. She experienced the fusion. Because there comes a point in the journey where do you stop seeing yourself as one timeline, and you begin to feel it, like a whisper behind the skin of reality. There is another you, right now, alive, awake, living a life you didn't choose, not past, not future, parallel. A version of you that turned left instead of right, that said yes instead of no, that stayed when you left, that left when you stayed. And sometimes, when the veil thins, you feel their pulse through yours. Blavatsky called it the dimensional double. This is not your soulmate. This is not a twin flame. This is you, with a different set of decisions and consequences. And here's what she discovered. If the soul is non-linear, then all your choices echo outward, spawning realities you can't see, but still effects. You and your double are connected through what she called the fractal field of identity, a thread made not of light, but of vibration. And when those vibrations align, you don't just feel each other, you can meet. The ritual she developed for fusion was not poetic, it was surgical. It wasn't about feeling mystical, it was about burning away every fragment of ego that couldn't survive the merge. 33 days. That's how long she would isolate. No lights, no words, no technology, no human contact, no identity stimulation of any kind. Because the first requirement was to strip down until the I was no longer dominant. Then came the breath, not just inhaling and exhaling, but breathing the pattern of the double. She developed a system of rhythmic breathing guided by mental geometry, a mathematical pattern she believed aligned with your nervous system with the parallel self's emotional code. When that alignment was precise, she'd sit before a black mirror, not for vanity, not for scrying. This mirror was obsidian, polished into smooth darkness, placed in a room with no corners, because, she said, corners anchor consciousness. And in this space, You had to become unanchored. Then, the gaze. Staring not at herself, but through herself. And here's where it begins to sound impossible. Unless you felt it, she said at some point, and the reflection changed. It blinked differently, it breathed out of rhythm, it smiled when she didn't. It wasn't mimicry, it was something else, something that saw her. That's when the fusion began. This wasn't possession, it wasn't madness, it was convergence, like two rivers rejoining their source, like meeting your own ghost in the dark and realizing they are just as scared of you. The fusion was emotional, sensory, physical, psychic. She would feel memories that weren't hers, but somehow we were. A kiss from someone she had never met, the grief of a child she never lost, scars in the soul from lives she didn't live, and yet they felt real, because they were hers, in the life of the double, and the price? Disorientation, blurring between who is who, dreams that bleed into waking life, phantom emotions, grief for things you never had, because your other self did. This is what she called the aftershock. You begin to question whether your thoughts are yours, whether your memories are singular, whether your path is only yours. Because when you merge with your double, you inherit not just their wisdom, but their wounds. But the reward was profound. Because once the fusion stabilizes, you gain access to decision points, moments in your current life that begin to bend under your perception. You begin to see the crossroads before they arrive. You begin to sense which path fractures you further, and which one brings convergence. You gain the ability to adjust timelines from the inside out, not with force but with resonance. This is what Blavatsky called the expansion of free will, because now you are no longer just acting from the logic of this self. You are operating from multiple points of knowing, and something miraculous happens. You stop fearing regret. You stop chasing the right choice. You begin to play the game from outside the board. You've fused with the one who made other choices, and now you're writing new ones across the multiverse. In the final chapters, Blavatsky will speak of the most mysterious place she ever visited, a liminal zone between all realities, a place where time collapses, space folds, and the self dissolves into pure perception. She called it the grey fringe, and it is the last place you pass before becoming something entirely new. But be warned, many have entered that zone and never returned whole. Because when you see too much, sometimes you can't go back, not because the door is closed, but because you no longer fit in the world you left. Chapter 7. The Grey Fringe. This is the place between worlds, where the illusion dies and nothing replaces it. There's a moment in the journey when you're no longer in this world, but you haven't fully crossed into the next. You're in between, no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. Helena Blavatsky called it the Grey Fringe, not a dimension, not a portal, not a place you visit. It's a zone of suspension, a passage made of pressure, silence, and perceptual collapse, a corridor between planes. And the truth is, you've probably been there. Briefly, in dreams, during trauma, in moments when time shattered and the air felt wrong. Blavatsky described it as an elegant kind of hell, not because it was torment, but because it was emptiness with no identity, no sun, no darkness, just perpetual twilight, where the trees grow upside down, the sky doesn't move, and the structures you see seem familiar, but slightly off. She said it's the place where your inner world leaks outward, where thought becomes space and fear becomes visible. Because in the grey fringe, you don't project onto reality. You live inside your projection. There is no map here, no rules, no language. Only one thing matters, your anchor. Because if you don't have something that pulls you back, you may not return, and you'll wander there, not dead, but forgotten by reality. Blavatsky learned this the hard way. She wrote that in her first crossing she almost lost herself. Her thoughts began speaking to her in foreign voices. She saw reflections of herself moving without her, and worse. She encountered what she called echoes. These were not people, not beings, but fragments, broken pieces of travelers who never finished their journey. They looked like her, spoke like her, mirrored what she denied, and they all wanted one thing, to switch places, because in the grey fringe, nothing has a stable shape, and if you lose focus for even a moment, something else can take yours. So, how did she survive? She found her anchor, but it wasn't an object, it wasn't a mantra, it was an emotion, sacred rage, not hate, not revenge, but the burning refusal to forget herself. She called it the holy fire of self-presence. That inner fire became her heartbeat, her pulse through the fog, her reason to come back, and it worked. When everything dissolved, when her memories scattered, when time unraveled, and her body felt like smoke, that fire kept pulsing, and the path opened. But she didn't return empty-handed. Because the grey fringe, as dangerous as it is also a library, a living archive of all crossings, all decisions, all timelines. If you listen in the silence, you begin to hear them. Footsteps that never walked this earth. Words you never spoke but somehow remember. Images from lives you never lived but ache for like home. This is where the multiverse hums. This is where the soul collects echoes. And if you can survive it, you come back not as a seeker, but as someone who remembers. Blavatsky described this place with reverence and fear, because once you pass through the grey fringe, you can no longer pretend. You've seen the machine behind the screen, you've walked the silence between pulses of reality, and you've stood at the edge of your own non-existence and chosen to return. But you don't return the same. You see too much. You feel too much. Faces become masks. Time feels artificial, and the world no longer fits around you like it once did, because now you carry the memory of what lies beneath it all. In the final moments of this audiobook, we'll return to the question we never asked out loud. What happens when you cross the veil and choose not to come back, not because you're lost, but because you've remembered where you truly belong? This is the return impossible, the final threshold, where choice collapses into truth. Because at the highest level the soul no longer asks to awaken, it asks to become. And Blavatsky, she didn't die like the others. She dissolved the mask and walked into the hall. Chapter 8. The One Who Remembers You. There is a version of you that never forgot, and it's waiting for you to remember that it's real. There is a silence beyond silence, not empty, not still, but aware. A kind of listening that comes not from ears, but from existence itself. Blavatsky described it as a hum that begins behind thought. The sound beneath the sound. A pressure behind the eyes. A pulse in the chest that isn't physical, but ancient. She said, "There's something in you older than your name, and it remembers everything. What if I told you that you met it before, not in this body, not in this timeline, but somewhere between dreams and death, in that space where the mind dissolves and something greater takes its place? It's not your higher self, not your guardian, not a future version trying to guide you. It's the original you, the first, the observer, the one who remembers, the part of you that never entered the game, but wrote the rules before forgetting it did. Most people call it a feeling, a flicker, a sense of déjà vu, that eerie sense of, I've been here before, even though you haven't. But it's not a glitch. It's a signal, a flare from a version of you that never left the source. And when you get quiet enough, when you stop running, numbing, achieving, you begin to feel it, watching, waiting, not with judgment, but with a kind of divine patience only eternity understands. Blavatsky encountered it once, but it didn't speak to her in words. It didn't give her visions or powers or knowledge. It did something far more dangerous. It held up a mirror and showed her everything she wasn't. And in that unbearable clarity, the identity she'd built, the seeker, the mystic, the teacher, collapsed like a dream after waking. She said, I saw my thoughts disintegrate. I saw my history unplugged, and I felt myself evaporate, but something remained. And it wasn't me. It was true. This is the final test, not one of bravery, not of strength, but of emptiness. Because to merge with the one who remembers, you must first let go of the one who forgot. You must dissolve your story, your wounds, your ambitions to awaken, even your obsession with healing. Because those are masks too, beautiful ones, but still illusions. And the one who remembers wears no mask. This version of you does not evolve. It does not grow. It does not seek. It simply is. It holds the full memory of all your lifetimes, not just human, but cosmic. It remembers the times you were a world, when you dreamed galaxies into form, when you whispered existence into the void and watched reality unfold around your vibration. That you is not spiritual. It's sovereign. It doesn't believe in awakening. It believes in integration. But here's the catch. To connect with it, you can't climb toward it. You must fall into it. You must unlearn yourself, and that process, it feels like death, because in a way it is. The death of the seeker, the death of the I, the death of the idea that you were ever separate to begin with. Blavatsky warned her closest students, do not chase the divine within you, because the one who chases is the one who must die. She wasn't trying to be dramatic. She was describing what happens when you get close to the one who remembers. It doesn't hug you. It doesn't praise you. It consumes you. And all that's left is it, the real you, the silent field beneath the noise, the light before light, the awareness before time. Once this reunion happens, your life doesn't improve. It ends. Not in body, but in fiction. You stop playing the game the way others do. You stop craving validation. You stop identifying with your past. You become the one who walks inside the world, but is no longer of it. Not aloof, not cold, but clear. Because you're not living from memory anymore. You're living from the origin. And that changes everything. People around you will feel it. Some will be drawn. Others will recoil. Not because you've changed, but because you've stopped pretending. You've become the mirror. And the one who remembers shines through your eyes, not preaching, not leading, just being. That's the greatest threat to the illusion, and the deepest invitation to those ready to return. You didn't come here to become something. You came here to remember that you already are everything. And the signal you've been following, it wasn't coming from the outside. It was you, calling yourself home through this entire audiobook. This wasn't a story, this was the sound of your own awakening, and now you're almost back. One more step, one more breath, and the one who remembers will no longer be a voice inside you. It will be you, and without forgetting again. Forgetting. Conclusion: the return impossible. You came looking for answers, but what you found was the end of who you thought you were. Some journeys take you far, some journeys take you deep, but the rarest ones take you to the place where returning is no longer an option, where the soul, after tasting something real, refuses to wear the mask ever again. Helena Blavatsky called this the return impossible. Not because the body can't come back, not because the eyes can't reopen, but because once your consciousness crosses that final veil, there's nothing left to return to. You've outgrown the script. And the self who lived it, it is now a ghost in your memory. This is not enlightenment. This is dissolution. It's not transcendence as people like to imagine it, all golden light and bliss. It's terrifying. It's holy. It's irreversible. Because this is where time ends, where language collapses, where the identity you defended for decades shatters like a cocoon, revealing that there was never anyone inside it. Only awareness, only witness, only you, before the name, before the trauma, before the veil. Blavatsky wrote, in a private notebook sealed by symbols no one could translate, I did not die. I crossed, and the body I left behind was simply excess. She described what she saw on the other side as not light, not darkness, but the absence of duality altogether. No up, no down, no self, no other, just a pulse, a single infinite rhythm that contained every life, every choice, every dimension. At once, a heartbeat outside of time, and in it, she became not a person, but a field, a frequency, a presence that could no longer be defined. But she made a choice to return, not as Helena, not as a teacher, but as a fragment, a signal, scattered across time in the minds of those ready to remember. That signal may be what led you here. That pulse may be the one stirring in your chest right now, that whisper in your soul that says, "This isn't new. You've heard this before, and this time, you're ready." So what do you do now? You don't need a guru. You don't need another ritual. You don't need to chase light. You just need to listen to what's already waking up inside you. Because here's the truth. You were never meant to stay asleep, and you were never meant to stay here. This reality was a layer, a classroom, a mask, but now the map is in your hands, the fractures are visible, and the mirror is gone. You're not being asked to believe. You're being called to remember, to walk forward, to cross. Blavatsky once wrote in the margin of a torn page, "I am the one who remembers. I am the one who dares. I am the one who crosses." Maybe that's you. Maybe you've been carrying the map all along. And this audiobook wasn't the message. Maybe it was the trigger. And now the choice is yours. Do you turn back or do you take the final step into the version of you who never forgot what you truly are? You've reached the end of the story, but stories are illusions. This was never about stories. This was about awakening. This was about you. And now, you remember.